Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to the latest episode of Retro Hangover.
And hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast, making metal music, maiming muses, mulling memes. This is Retro Hangover. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen, and as always, your host, Shane. Heavy Machine Dick Dragon Koski.
The Dick Dragon Super Weapon 001, to be exact.
It's just giant, like you have elephantitis, except it's made with metal.
I don't know how to feel about that. That sounds like something you should get looked into.
You got to wheelbarrow it around.
Yeah.
You can put like little eyeballs on your balls, and then make your nose a smiley face because it just droops so far below it, and can be like a little cute anime character.
Hey, there you go. Yeah.
Like a French anime character.
I must confess, I don't know if I've ever seen French anime.
I mean, it's all anime, right?
I mean,
they liked anime.
Franime?
Pretty sure.
Is that what's going to be?
Franime?
Yeah, French anime, Franime.
I like it.
It's a new thing. There you go.
And while you watch it, everyone just smokes cigars and smells like body odor and piss.
Wow. All right, well, if we had any French listeners, they have tap the fuck out now.
We love you, France. I think we have some.
Did past tense probably.
Do they have a good sense of humor?
Who knows?
I hope so. Oh, but we are here to record a podcast about the video game Metal Slug.
Indeed.
Yes. Sorry, France. So, I don't even know where to go with this.
Like I said before, it's always a fantastic strategy to just immediately try to alienate parts of your audience.
Look, I'm just going by what my grandfather said when he was in World War II. He said he hated France, and he said everywhere he went in France that the streets smelled like piss. And you know what? I can understand that, because have you been to New Orleans?
I mean, that's fair. Have you been to a parking garage here in Jacksonville? I mean,
that is also fair.
Terrible.
That is also and meth. If meth had a smell.
But yeah, well, what we're really getting at is just everywhere sucks. That's why I like to stay indoors and play video games like Metal Slug. Because they don't smell like piss. Put that on the back of the box. And
I think he might be French. So there you go, Frenchies.
Hey, there you
Actually,
go.
I have no idea if he's French. But one of them's last name is Rossi, which is Italy. I don't know.
Closest you're going to get.
Yes. But before we get into our topic du jour, see, I love you, Frenchies. We like to talk about games we've been playing, as we are wont to do.
I'm sure they appreciate being referred to as Frenchies.
I don't know. Could be frogs.
Wow. Yeah, we're just digging that hole. We're like Kate Bush, but instead of running up the hill, we're just digging that hole.
Woo! Like most people are not probably going to be too upset except for them. And we really mean no disrespect. As we are wont to do, we talk about what we've been playing lately. So, Shane, have you been playing any games lately?
Well, wouldn't you know it? I have been.
Oh,
yeah. It's crazy. I know. Truth be told, it really hasn't differed all that much from what I was playing before. I think in the last episode when we talked about this kind of stuff.
Oh,
pretty much it's the same, honestly. Like I'm essentially treating Fallout 76 as a single player game, which you can totally do. I'm just kind of doing that. I will occasionally have a couple of my buddies jump in and we'll do some multiplayer, and that's a good time. But part of me wishes that this hadn't been, it's kind of the same way that I feel about like Elder Scrolls Online or things like that, where I just wish it hadn't been an online game. Like there's almost no reason for it to be. I would have just preferred to just have another single player Fallout experience. That would have been okay with me. It's kind of the same thing that happened with Knights of the Old Republic. Like, don't get me wrong, that MMO is pretty good, but it would have functioned just fine as just another like KOTOR installment. But everything has to be a live service, so it's got to be online, I guess. But anyway, I am still enjoying that, working my way through the plethora of quest lines that they've got available in that game. So that's pretty cool. What else am I doing? Oh, well, I don't think I mentioned this last time. Maybe I did. I don't know. Everything is a blur, but I did fire back up Final Fantasy V.
Nice.
Specifically the Pixel remaster. I picked that up on Steam because after doing a little bit of digging, I came to the conclusion that was probably going to be the best way to play it, just because it takes a lot of the things that were fixed in the later ports of the game, like to GBA and what have you, and kind of packages that all in with even more additional fixes from like the patches and stuff that they've done post release. So there's been a lot of like balancing and bug fixing work that was not done in previous releases of the game. So to me, this seems to be the best version at this point. And also because it's the Pixel remaster, the art style is pretty faithful to the original, but like just, prettier. And also it has the soundtrack done in a full orchestral score, which is pretty awesome. Anyway, that's how I've been playing that. I wanted to give it another honest shot because I may possibly have made the wrong decision that nobody definitely warned me about several times about playing FF5
weird.
The first time. Yeah, weird. With the 4-job fiesta and getting stuck with a shitty combination of jobs and the experience being terrible. So I'm having a much better time with it, surprisingly, this time around.
Yeah, I can't imagine why you would be. It's not like I don't. Do I know these people that recommended that you not play the 4-job fiesta as your first time playing Final Fantasy V?
I mean, maybe you might have heard of them, around.
Oh,
occasionally.
Huh.
Yeah. But anyway, so I've put a pretty decent chunk of time into that. I am very much enjoying it, and I would like to go on record and say that I was wrong about FF5. So there you go. And let's see. I think outside of that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really been notable, honestly. Lately, it's really just been, I think, those two things. I think there might have been a small like smattering of some Vampire Survivors in there because of course, but
casual.
Yeah. But no, man, I think that's pretty much it for me right now. I don't know. What about you? What have you been up to?
I have just been editing a ton of stuff.
Well, that doesn't sound like games.
It doesn't. But this is the reason I don't have a lot. I did fortunately play a game since last recording, and that has been Ys Memories of Celceta, which I think I mentioned on the last one. However, I did beat it. So I'm looking forward to start playing Ys 5 here, and I'm looking forward to hopefully stream it on Twitch the entire time I play it, just like I did with Final Fantasy V. So if I haven't started it already, because I have a lot of things I need to catch up on in addition to getting started for one of the games that's going to be coming up here in the near future, which is going to take me a little bit of time to get into October. I'm going to need to start playing those games. Just go ahead and subscribe to our Twitch channel, and hopefully you can see me play that from the beginning, and I look forward to that. But I will say, Ys Memories of Celceta, I did record an RFR on it, and I can say this, it's probably my longest one, and I don't get too crazy, but I will say, for those of you who will not listen to it or can't listen to it, if you listen to an episode of The Good, Bad, and the Backlog, they're not too far off. I apologize to both you, Adam and Kieran, for all the shit I gave you about that game. You were fairly close to the mark. So I did not love it. I didn't hate it, but I certainly did not love it. I'm just kind of let down overall. That's where I've been playing this week. So it's kind of ending on a letdown. I need to find something to reinvigorate me. And unfortunately, by the sounds of it, Ys 5 is not going to be that game. But it just means I can get to whatever's after Ys 5. I'm probably going to replay Final Fantasy 7 after that. And I do look forward to that in terms of casual play. But I have a lot of games I need to do for the podcast as well. Not all the time in the world to do it, like, many of you. So
that's true.
I am going to do what I can. Yeah.
Doing
what I can.
Well, I mean, speaking of games that we have to play for the show, and probably going to be more of a positive upswing, I think, at the end of that.
I think so.
Is Metal Slug.
Yeah.
As we are wont to do, as Chris likes to say before me on most occasions now.
I just stole it from you.
He did. He just co-opted it. We are going to provide a little bit of some background on the game du jour, and to do that,
that's a French word.
It is. Yeah, that's proof. We like the French here.
We like du jour.
That's right. I like petit déjeuner. Anyway, Jesus. All right, so we're going to talk about Metal Slug. So, Chris, would you like to give the people and any of our fine French listeners who are still sticking it out a brief history on Metal Slug?
Oui.
Metal Slug.
If you're anything like us, you may have held a long-standing belief that the Metal Slug franchise was directly influenced by its run-and-gun predecessor, Contra. As it turns out, we've all been largely wrong. The story of Metal Slug begins with Kazuma Kujo, a playtester for Irem America Corp., a small company working on putting R-Type 2 through its paces prior to release. Kujo had grander aspirations, of course, but unfortunately suffered from a case of what we'll call creative constipation. He just could not figure out what his big idea was going to be. This would all change on one otherwise unassuming afternoon when Kujo took a short break from the office to sit on a bench in a public park. The soft gurgling sound of a nearby water fountain seemed to wash away any brain blockage Kujo may have had, providing him with the notion of a shoot-'em-up similar to R-Type, but with submarines in place of the more traditional spaceships. This flash of inspiration would result in Irem's next arcade release, In the Hunt. Kujo and the team at Irem would follow this with what could easily be considered the true spiritual predecessor to Metal Slug, Geostorm, or Gunforce 2, released in 1994. This would be the last major title to be developed and produced by Irem, a move that would eventually lead Kujo and roughly 15 other staff members to strike out on their own and create a new game studio, Nazca Corporation. Leaning on their experience with In the Hunt and Geostorm, the team at Nazca set out to create a worthy successor, one that was simple, exciting, and easy to control. Initially, the game put players in control of a tank for the entirety of the experience, similar to In the Hunt, but playtester feedback proved to be less than glowing. The game seemed to lack personality, so Nazca would go back to the drawing board and retool what they had made. While they ultimately kept the tank, most of the game would now be played as a human soldier, either Captain Marco Rossi or Lieutenant Tarma Roving, each with multiple weapons and power-ups at their disposal. Additionally, they would lighten up the atmosphere, giving the game its now signature, slightly goofy, tongue-in-cheek presentation. The resulting product would be dubbed Metal Slug, a reference to the tank that was once the central focal point of the gameplay. Metal Slug was initially released on the Neo Geo MVS on April 19, 1996, with the home port to the Neo Geo AES on May 24th. The Neo Geo CD would also see a release of July 5th. The arcade machine enjoyed a high level of success, becoming one of the top 10 highest-grossing arcade games of 1996. That didn't mean critics were universally in love with the game, though, as many pointed to the game's unfair difficulty and frequent slowdown. In spite of these flaws, there was a general acknowledgement that the game was, overall, a thoroughly enjoyable arcade experience for anyone looking to blow off a bit of steam. The success of Metal Slug led it to escape the exclusivity of the Neo Geo market, with it quickly finding a home on the Sega Saturn as well as Sony's PlayStation. Beyond that, the game has seen a multitude of ports on almost anything that has been available to play video games, particularly on compilations. Additionally, Metal Slug would see a string of sequels, similar to Mega Man, the series continuing even to this day. And that is your brief history of Metal Slug.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris, for that brief history of Metal Slug. You know, I feel like, and I'm guessing here, of course, because we try not to cross-reference each other's notes on these things beforehand, to provide you, the listener, with a more natural experience.
All natural.
That's right. Much like the French. That that you probably experienced this in the arcades for the first time. Am I right on that?
No.
Really?
I saw it in the arcades eventually. I always knew what Metal Slug was because you'd see it in like the Neo Geo cabinets. But for some reason, like the multiple cabinets of a Neo Geo when I was a kid just kind of turned me off from it, even though there's a lot of games that were ported from the Neo Geo to like the Super Nintendo and other systems that I would play. Like Super Baseball 2020 is a prime example of that I didn't know was an SNK game. In fact, I knew very little about SNK for the longest time. But Metal Slug was one of those games I saw in passing. I'm taking that you did play it in the arcade then.
Yeah, I did. Again, and it's actually funny because I never really thought about this until kind of circling back to it a number of times here on the show over the years. But oddly enough, being in small town Maine, somehow I lucked out in having a local arcade that managed to have a lot of the big titles throughout the years. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know how they managed that. I think I said this on a previous episode, but I guess being the no pun intended only game in town probably benefited them somewhat because it was quite literally the only arcade for 2 entire sister cities. But yeah, they had Metal Slug and I do remember playing it. I wasn't like a huge like Metal Slug fan or anything, but it was one of those ones, and this will certainly come up when we talk about, you know, the gameplay and graphics for sure, but it's impossible to ignore this game when you see it.
No, you're absolutely right. That's a fact.
It's just so over the top and loud and bombastic and looks amazing. That like it's just you can't walk by a Metal Slug machine and not at least take a glance at it.
Oh, you have to.
And I'll never say that I was like good at this game because spoilers, I'm really not. But I did take a crack at it a number of times at the old Dream Machine arcade and up in Maine. So rest in peace.
Yeah, so I'm glad you played it in the arcade. I can't see myself playing this game with an arcade stick though. I know a lot of people did. I mean, obviously, if you were playing this on the MVS or the AES, you naturally played this with an arcade stick. On the Neo Geo CD, you didn't necessarily, did you play with that little nub?
Right.
I love that nub for fighting games though. But I think the first time I played it, I don't know if it was on the Wii or on Steam. I can't tell you which one it was. It took me a long time to play a Metal Slug game, like a long time.
Was this the first Metal Slug you'd ever played of the whole series?
I think I maybe played Metal Slug 2 or 3 first.
Okay.
I don't even think this was the first Metal Slug I played. It may have been. I don't know. They like because all the Metal Slugs kind of blend together anyway, in a weird way.
Yeah,
That's why I said in the brief history, like Mega Man, but even more so because the graphical style, like after the 6 Mega Mans, they shift. They never really shift from Metal Slug for a good reason. It looks really good.
Yeah, they kind of don't have to, honestly.
No, they really don't. But I think that was the first time I really played it. And I mean, that's mostly because I didn't even know who SNK was, as I said earlier, really until the Dreamcast when I started playing the King of Fighters games. And that's when I was like, oh, yeah, this Neo Geo thing, it might be interesting. What else did they do? And then I got the Neo Geo Pocket Color. No, that was the first Metal Slug game I played, was Metal Slug First Mission on the Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Shit. Okay.
That was the first one.
I mean, that's not a bad game, but it's definitely nowhere near the same experience.
No, it's not. But like, you know of Metal Slug, even if you hadn't played it. Like I said, you knew about it.
Right.
So that was the first Metal Slug I played, was for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. And then I think I finally played the original on the Wii with either the SNK compilation or the Metal Slug Anthology or Steam in one of those Humble Bundle sales when Neo Geo games were on there like every other week.
You know what? Actually, I am surprised by that. I would have thought that you had experienced this earlier, just, I don't know, given your repertoire. But Although I find it, it's funny, and I don't know if you felt the same way, but not that like as a kid, I was like, yes, SNK, I'm familiar with their library. But it was more of just like, as I got older, I just associated SNK strictly with fighting games. I don't know. For some reason, this feels like a weird outlier to me.
Yeah, I can completely understand that, too. I mean, you look at their history, though, you look at SNK's history, and really up until King of Fighters, they did a lot more than just fighting games. I mean, since then, though, it's been fighting games and Metal Slug for the most part.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. So you can't be blamed.
I mean, I was to say SNK themselves went bankrupt and got bought out, like 2001, I think it was.
Oh, we could do an entire episode about SNK, man. That's a disaster.
Yeah. Well,
it's also like a redemption story, too. It's a really good comeback story. And then at the end, it involves Saudi Arabia and yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll do an episode on SNK sometime. It's actually been a minute since we've done like an industry profile type episode. So
yeah,
maybe we're due for one.
SNK is a good one, too.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, what's the last Metal Slug thing? I'm pretty sure it was a shitty mobile game. I think that was the last thing.
It was XX. I don't know what XX came out for. Probably everything, because that's what they did. Either way, like SNK has a good story, but that is something that leads us into our next topic.
Yes,
about Metal Slug and its plot and story. Which, okay,
that's like what do we say about that exactly?
In the words of our friends over at Secret Levels, we're just reluctantly crouched at the starting line.
I don't.
That's a reference to them. Shout out.
Yeah, there you go. Like I don't know, man. I mean, this is kind of one of those games where it doesn't really need it, does it?
I mean, there is one, kind of.
I think there is a story somewhere in there, but it's basically just like, I mean, I get the sense that it is extremely loosely based on World War II, because the enemies you're fighting basically look like German soldiers, and some of
they're very German.
The iconography in the backgrounds with like the red flags with the white and black, very reminiscent of a certain group of individuals. So I feel like that's what they're going for here. Although the interesting thing about that, and maybe it's just like a mix of both or something, for some reason, and it might just be like the levels that are in the game, I always got like a Vietnam vibe from this game. Was that just me?
I think like the characters that you play as, yes. But even I was thinking about is like, what does this most resemble to me? It gives off like the bad guys gives a lot of World War II vibes, and also like a lot of the enemies that you fight, like the fighter jets that you're fighting in, the tank that you're in, and everything like that.
Yeah,
it seems like a clash of the two. But I could definitely, because there's like a lot of swamps and stuff like that, a lot of tropical areas, I could definitely understand why you would think it was Vietnam. And Vietnam is a lot closer to the making of this game. It's only 20 years removed as opposed to 50.
Right.
So I could understand why they would get some Vietnam vibes, especially if you're in Japan. But I take that back. Japan probably has harder feelings about World War II. Just a gut intuition. I could understand where you get those vibes from, but I definitely agree with your first point that it was probably more inspired by World War II.
I feel like that's probably fair. And it might be just sort of a little bit of a mix of both in there. So at a high level, just to give the game credit wherever it's due. I mean, the story, such as it is, can basically be summed up in one sentence, right? You're playing as either Marco or Tarma, and you are members of the Peregrine Falcon Strike Force. And you are fighting against the rebel army, creatively named, led by one Donald Morden. And you are trying to overthrow his coup d'etat to prevent a new world order. So extremely vague, very like 80s ass kind of.
Yeah. Coup d'etat against what?
Yeah. Like 80s action movie plot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. That's pretty much it.
We're doing a coup d'etat against what? Against an organization that's going to do the New World Order.
Yeah.
So they're declaring a coup d'etat against everybody?
Yep.
Is that how this is working?
Yeah. They didn't just say it, they declared it. So that makes it official.
International coup d'etat.
Also, coup d'etat is French. So there you go.
You're welcome, Frenchies. Eat it, frogs. Kidding. We love you.
So unnecessary. So, I mean, I guess we should probably just move on to what everybody actually like gives a shit about Metal Slug 4, right? Which is,
Yes.
well, one of two things. I'm gonna let me give it more credit than that. Let's just kind of slide right over to the gameplay. So, what are your thoughts about how this game plays?
Oh, dude, it's solid, man. I mean, it has some flaws we'll probably get into in a minute here, but for the most part, this game is a fucking phenomenal running gun.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty seamless. Everything is exceptionally smooth and very responsive. I do wish now that I'm saying I can't play with an arcade stick, I do wish I had an arcade stick to play it with so I could get a general feeling how it was intended to be played, because all I've had, of course, is a D-pad in order to control it. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking about a game that just does what it's supposed to do, like you shoot when you shoot, you jump when you jump, you move right and left when you're supposed to, you get weapons that are useful, and even your base pea shooter isn't horrendously underpowered. The tank kind of sucks to control, even though it's powerful. But yeah, this game is a dream, absolute dream in terms of base control.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. There's really not much I can complain about here. It's very obvious that there was a lot of attention to detail put into, making sure that this is a tight game experience. Absolutely. The one thing that I would probably point out, and it is, listen, to be fair, like it is nitpicking, because there really isn't a lot to say negatively about how Metal Slug plays. I mean, there's a reason that it stands as, a sort of like a bar for a lot of games going forward to measure by. But the one thing that I've personally kind of always struggled with it is the fact that your gun, the directional like path of your gun is tied to your movement.
Yeah.
And that makes it really awkward in a lot of cases, where something like, even though we made it very clear that this wasn't necessarily directly inspired by Contra, it's hard not to see some similarities. And one of the things, being the big Contra 3 buff that I am, one of the things that I really wish that this game had was a way to root yourself stationary and be able to point your gun independent of movement like you can in Contra, because that would make a lot of situations in this game a little bit easier to handle. Because I found myself basically struggling, right, to keep moving to not get hit, because the pedigree of this game is very rooted in like something like R-Type and other shmups. That was a lot of the inspiration, as we said in the brief history. And you can see that comparatively to Contra, this game plays actually a lot more like a shmup. And if you think about it that way, it probably helps. But trying to dodge all of the different projectiles and all that stuff while also aiming correctly can be a little bit of a challenge in this game because of how that works. Like if you need to aim up, then you are also going to be like kind of trying to aim up, but then quickly moving in one direction to move yourself and then trying to move back up again. And if there was just a way to independently control those, I think that would be an improvement. But, like I said, it's kind of a nitpick at the end of the day. And you got to think about this being released as an arcade game first and foremost, where, you had a stick, and I think the machine technically had 4 buttons, but this game only uses 3. The last button just isn't used. So,
yeah, they could have used that button to be stationary. I actually have quite a few more gripes other than you. I do think it is worth noting that, yes, one, this is an arcade game. 2, this is made by someone who loves shmups. Mm-hmm. Now, but this is not a shmup, but there are some DNA in there. I don't think it's as close as you say it is. But in terms of the game being more memorization than reaction, like you get in your typical run and gun, because I think, yeah, you can memorize Contra. As we're talking like, oh, it's not inspired by Contra. Oh, I'm going to talk about Contra. I don't care. It's like, if you look at Contra, you can play that game without necessarily memorizing it. Maybe not so much the arcade, but Contra 3, and fuck Super C. I don't like Super C. I know a lot of people do. That might be a hot take. Yeah, I mean, it pays off if you memorize those games. You know where everything's coming from.
Right.
But that's certainly more of a reactionary game. So if you play this game like that, it's probably not going to work out as well for you. But I think you can. It's just harder. So like memorization is more of that shmup kind of thing going on with it, and knowing where things are coming from, what to do, and what kind of weapons are where, and all that stuff. Now, other gripes that I do have, key gripes.
Okay.
This game likes to split you up sometimes into two directions where you have one path that goes down and one path that goes up.
Mm-hmm.
This normally is not a problem. I don't have problems with these, but there's no way to do a down jump onto another platform. So in most action games, since like the dawn of the NES, if you press down and jump and there's a platform beneath you, your character will jump down to that platform. You can't do that in this game. In fact, this makes one of the boss fights in this game, whatever the snow level is, this guy who has 3 platforms on either side, and he jumps up on the platforms and he jumps between the platforms and fires a machine gun at you. If you could jump down a platform, that boss is far more manageable, but you can't. You have to play it a little bit differently, like go vertical and jump over them. So this game just becomes very vertical at points, and not being able to go back down will lead to a lot of those paths closing off to you. Sometimes where you're going to have enemies on those paths that you can't go down and shoot optimally, where you're going to have to like jump and shoot downward because you just can't shoot straight downward in a non-jumping position.
Right.
That's an issue. That's a problem for me.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. The other thing is there is some unfair difficulty from time to time, and mostly because your character is slow, and there's sometimes that gaps are so precise that you have to time them perfectly. I know a lot of that is because it's an arcade game and you have to really play it a lot to get good at it, especially in shorter games. So I can't like fault it too much, but it is a very difficult game. And there are times where this game essentially will set you up to die unless you are very precise and you memorize that location to a T. Those are some things that did kind of get in my way in that aspect, where I can't say these are nitpicky things. I think these are major flaws that really hold the game back from being a Contra, from being a Mega Man. And I understand those games were, well, not so much Contra, but I mean, the version that everyone is familiar with were built from the ground up to be great NES games or great console games. Whereas this didn't have to do that, because the entire point of a Neo Geo AES, the home console, was to just take that arcade experience and give it to you in the home with no degradation. So if you're talking about how, if you made this game easier, would it be the same game? Not really, but I think if it was built from the ground up to be a console game and maybe be a little bit longer, it could have been a little bit better.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, when I was talking about that, you know, that was the one nitpick I had, that's really centralized just around like the control scheme. Like that was it.
I'm sorry.
No. You actually articulated a lot of the same things that I tended to take some issue with playing through the game. The difficulty is definitely one, and it feels like, again, it might be that if you were to play this over and over again, I'm sure, just like I eventually got good at Contra 3, that you can get good at Metal Slug. I do feel like there's a little bit more variability in the enemies and their attack patterns, such as they are in this game, than in something like Contra 3. To me, and I could just be biased, which is very likely, but to me, it felt like something like Contra 3, they felt more predictable. Like the attacks felt more predictable once you get to know what they are.
Sure.
And I felt like in this game, there's a little bit more of a random element, but that also could just be compounded by the other thing that I have an issue with, which is, you know how I said that this is something that's really hard to ignore when you see it, like in an arcade. Part of that is because this game is like barely controlled chaos most of the time, which plays real well in an arcade setting, right? Because you're like, holy fuck, this game is off its fucking nuts. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And look at all this shit that's happening, and dudes are screaming and bombs are going off, and it's a assault on the senses, which in many ways this game is. But that kind of also becomes problematic because for most of the, let's say 30 to 45 minutes ish, you know, that it takes to get through the entirety of this game, which is only 6 levels. For me, I definitely died a few times, more than a few times. So it's probably closer to the 45 minutes to an hour, but it just felt like a nonstop barrage. And that's like cool in some ways because it's very bombastic, like I said, but I feel like it's almost an artificial difficulty because they're just throwing so much shit at you constantly that there's many instances, like you said, where you kind of feel like you're set up to fail. And I can't get away from the notion that this was in some ways purposeful because this was first and foremost an arcade game that are meant to munch your quarters, right?
Oh, of course.
And because this is basically a straight port of the arcade game, you're not going to get any, sort of finessing of that perhaps unfair difficulty. You're just getting the same exact experience, for better or worse. Like, I mean, if you really wanted that pure arcade experience in the home, then congratulations, that's what you got. But I would say if I had my druthers, I would tend to agree with you that I feel like I kind of wish that this game had been twice as long, but half as difficult.
I can agree with that. Well, I will say is the boss fights for the most part are rather fair.
Yeah.
And fun. I didn't have much difficulty with the boss fights. And that's not to say the boss fights were necessarily pushovers, but it's just because I think the patterns were a little bit more predictable. I think that there was some easy memorization tricks that if you've played enough of these type of games, you're going to be a little bit more comfortable than someone who hasn't.
Right.
But they're also large and very, I don't know.
Well, there's also less going on.
They felt like bosses.
Yeah, there's less going on the screen during a boss fight. So like just that alone inherently makes them a little bit more manageable. And you're right. Like the final boss is a great example of this. Mm-hmm. The dude in the helicopter or whatever, because you can pick up pretty quick exactly what his pattern is. And so, if there's like those 3 or 4 like platforms on the left hand side, that if you just kind of continually cycle through, like going down on the ground, shooting him down there, he starts dropping bombs. So then you jump up and you kind of scale those platforms. He shoots the rockets across, you dodge those, hop down, rinse and repeat. It's pretty much a straightforward affair. So yeah, like in those regards, I would tend to agree that strangely enough, I think the boss encounters by and large are actually probably the easiest parts of the game.
Yeah. You would say they're the coup de grace?
I might, if I didn't know what coup de grace meant.
It's French.
Oh, okay, great.
I fucking hate myself for keeping this theme going. What do you think of the tanks?
I mean, I had the same issue, really, as far as like the gameplay is concerned. Like, you're more powerful, obviously, because you've got a tank gun now, and you can stand up to some more damage. So you can be a little bit more brazen with your approach to things. I mean, I did like that the tank is more or less just as mobile as you are as a person.
Yes.
That's 100% unfucking realistic, but it works really well in a gameplay sense. So I was totally fine with that. I really like that particular mechanic, but I still have the same issue of like trying to aim that tank cannon while also using the same method of input to move myself. There were a lot of times where you're just kind of wildly shooting in an arc because you're trying to move yourself in a certain direction and you're just not really hitting anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I do like the ability to shoot a cannon to have a little bit of an arc so you can hit things that aren't necessarily like on the ground. It does hurt when you have things that are like right in front of you, might not be able to hit them per se. But yeah, I mean, overall, I can agree with that in terms of a tank that's sweeping kind of back and forth, where if you need to back up to kind of give yourself some distance from the enemy or dodge a bullet, you'll just see yourself like shooting all the way to behind you with like shooting up above you. And then it'll just have to rotate all the way back. I get why they did that. They didn't want to make this tank too overly powerful. Right. They didn't want you to break the game with it. It's very hard to control. And the expert players, yeah, they'll get a lot out of it. What I did find too is, especially later in the game with the tank, it almost felt like, again, you were set up to lose that thing almost immediately unless you knew exactly what was coming at you.
Yeah, I mean, you get rained down upon as far as like grenades, and I'm pretty sure that there are like landmines and other shit. Like,
oh, it's all hell.
Just purposefully put there to yeah. And I mean, you will take more damage in the tank, but not by. I mean, I don't know. I would say not by much, but I mean, like, you're basically one hit kill if you're outside of the tank. But it doesn't last that long. Let's just say
it is one hit kill. No, but overall, I think we can both agree that, like, this game has its flaws.
Sure.
But the gameplay is fun. Overall, I think you're going to have a good time.
It is. I feel like the best way to play this, perhaps unsurprisingly, is in an arcade. Or at the very least, if you can't be in an arcade, because I really think that this game benefits from that atmosphere. It was built for that atmosphere. And I just feel like the overall experience is going to be better if you are in, the right place to be playing this game. If, barring that, I would say play with a friend, because co-oping this, I think, is going to be way more fun than just playing by yourself like we did.
Yeah, when is it not?
Yeah.
It's just a general rule of thumb. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's like, I guess what I'm trying to articulate is because this game is fairly punishingly difficult the further you get into it. Like, it starts out as like, it's no slouch, but like it's manageable, right? For like the first, like, let's say 1 or 2 levels, give or take, or even the first half. But it ramps up pretty steeply as you go. And I guess what I'm getting at is you can almost forgive that and overlook it if you are like standing side by side with a friend at an arcade cabinet, just like jamming quarters into this thing with like a beer next to you. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's the experience for this game.
No, I have no disagreements with that. It's just, yeah, if you're going to get the total ambiance, that's what you're going for.
Yeah, for sure.
So in terms of ambiance and how things look and feel, like the presentation of things get you in the mood. I know this is not the best segue here, but how would you think, we've already praised this to high heaven already, but the graphics, how did the game look to you? How's this game aged?
Dude, okay. Metal Slug is probably one of, I won't say the, because that's an absolute, but it is one of the best looking pixel art games, just period, ever made. And that applies to pretty much the whole series. I mean, especially the first 3, but the artistry that went into the graphics of this game blows my fucking mind. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Like, I can't say enough good things about just how good this game looks.
It blows my mind. This was on a Neo Geo.
Yeah.
Like, not really when you consider what was coming out later, but when you compare this to some of the earlier Neo Geo games, which still looked really good for what it's worth, this thing is just like, wow, this game is the pixel art is exquisite.
Yeah. And there was definitely a very purposeful drive behind that from the dev team. Because if you go and dig up some like old interviews with the IREM folks, they were very clear about this, that part of the reason they wanted to make sure that this game looked and played as good as it does is because they knew this was a couple of years after, 3D polygonal games had already started kind of becoming more mainstream. And so like they wanted to ensure that they could compete, because they were concerned that they were going to be releasing yet another 2D sprite based game when the world was moving on. And so they were like, okay, well, if we're going to fucking do this, then we're going to blow the pants off of everybody. And they sure as hell did. Apart from just the level of detail that is in every single sprite, the animations are just so smooth. There's so many frames of animation and you don't get that. And it's, if you're not like, a complete fucking nerd like we are, maybe it might be hard to articulate that sometimes, but that's when something feels stilted or janky like that in a 2D game, it's probably because they have a low amount of frames in an animation. This game does not have that. Everything is buttery smooth. Every little interaction or even the idle animations have just so much detail put into them that it's amazing.
Yeah, I'll say that's definitely the highlight. Is as good as it looks, a lot of that is driven from the amount of frames and animation everything just has in this. It's so smooth, it's so fluid, and it's very reactionary too, because what you get with a lot of more modern games that try to do the pixel art thing is that sometimes your reaction can be delayed because the artists want to show off how many frames of animation they can put into a character movement.
Right.
That's not something you really get here, but you still get all of that. It looks just, I can't really articulate how impressive this is. If you release this today and Metal Slug never came out, like let's pretend Metal Slug never came out and you just drop this in the Steam store today, I think it would be still accepted as a game with phenomenal pixel art.
Oh, absolutely.
This is one of the best pixel art games ever. We were talking, we just did a recording for Shredder's Revenge and how good the pixel art looks there. It's comparable to the Shredder's Revenge, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I think it's comparable to that game, which was released this year.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that I think the artwork here is better. Not to not to denigrate any of the work that they did on Shredder's Revenge, because they did a bang up job there too. But if you just look at the sprite work and just the backgrounds are just so vibrant and just full of little details, and there isn't a single thing in this game that doesn't look stellar. And like the giant, boss animations and the sprites that they used for those, and just how like you have all these different independent sprites working together to create this one large boss character, and the way that they do it. I mean, it's one of the things that I always loved about Contra 3 is that they pulled that off very well with a lot of most of the sprite work in that game too, but especially the giant, half screen filling bosses. And they do a lot of that here as well. But I mean, as much as I love Contra 3, again, I would say that this still tops that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think another defining thing about this, I said it was the frames of animation. I'm adding another one, is the amount of personality. Mm-hmm. And like, let's be honest here too. Nazca Corporation, when you look at In the Deep and was it Gun Force 2 or whatever? Yeah. Geofront, whatever it's called.
Geostorm. Yeah.
Geostorm. Those games look phenomenal too. They have the same trademark, the same inspiration. They have that same look to it. This is like a Nazca Corporation. It's just their trademark. Dolphin Blue, I think, was made by a bunch of those same people for it's something that was ported to the Dreamcast. You can play Dolphin Blue on the Dreamcast. Mm-hmm. That game looks really, really good too. It's just what they do. They are the best at pixel art. I don't think there's any other way to put it. And the personality, that's what I was getting with this. The personality is outstanding. As Shane mentioned earlier, how over the top and cheeky it is, and just how everything is just, it's like not over the top funny, but it's still comical enough to let you know it's not like this dark, grim, serious, apocalyptic stuff like Contra,
right?
Which is what you always see in running guns up until this point. At least if you didn't see it, it wasn't done as well as this. Like, it just, the personality is exuberant, emotional in all the right ways, and not like, oh, it makes me feel like sad or something. No, it makes you feel happy. It just makes you realize how fun you can have playing a game killing people in war, which is horrible, but it does that.
But they're kind of sort of Nazis, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's cartoonish as hell.
Yeah.
It's like you're playing Looney Tunes, but in World War II, which also was something Looney Tunes did.
That's actually apropos. Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I mean, yeah, and you can see a lot of that. Like one great example of that is when you're rescuing the prisoners of war, right?
Yeah,
they all got these big ass bushy beards, and they're in these like tattered pants. And when you rescue them, I mean, they give you a power up or like a point bonus for rescuing them, but the way that they do it, right, is like they hold up like a pair of pants, like a bullfighter, and then they pull it away, and then there's a power up there that wasn't there before, and you can grab it. Just little things like that. And here's the thing, right? If you really want to go into the weeds on just how much detail went into the creation of the visual representation of this game, go look up some of the videos out there on YouTube that deconstruct the explosion effects of Metal Slug. Oh, it's not even like, it's not something you really think about, right? Not a lot of people think about explosion animations because it's just like a given. You're just like, yeah, of course, things blow up in games, fine, whatever. But there is a very noticeable difference here. If you've ever played like any other game like this, again, we can go back to Contra. As much as I like Contra 3, the explosion animations they generally have are pretty stock standard looking things.
They're circles.
Yeah, they're circles. Exactly. But here, not only do they have incredibly detailed explosion animations, but they've done it for every single thing in this game. And by that, I mean like every like smaller like bullet hit has its own unique little animation. up to the bombs, the grenades that get thrown. They have their own explosion that is completely different from like the missiles. They all have their own unique explosion animation, and every single one of them has like honestly borderline unnecessary frames of animation in it. Like they put so much work into this stuff. And again, like that's really getting into the weeds, but it just helps to like really illustrate just how much time went into making this game look as good as it does.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, you know, we've said it many, many times on the show that there is a reason that 2D sprite based games almost never age poorly, you know, especially in the 16-bit
on.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the 8-bit and prior, those can be a little rough. Let's be real. But
yeah,
the majority of the 16-bit era of 2D sprite work will almost always look good. It's got that timelessness to it. And this just takes that and puts it like at a whole other level to where, as Chris mentioned, even games coming out today where people are trying to harken back to and sort of like ape this kind of style of 2D sprite work, they can't even reach this very high bar that, you know, Cujo and the IREM team kind of set way back in, you know, 96.
At least consistently. At least consistently.
Right.
I also have one final take on the graphics here before we move on.
Sure.
I want to see your take on this.
Okay.
The styling to me gives me the feeling is if Mel Brooks made a World War II video game.
Yeah, I could see that. Like it's just that level of sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, kind of dry humor, but not so much that it's like in your face. Like, I don't know, let's say Borderlands for no reason that I picked that one in particular.
Right.
But yeah, I could see that.
Like it just, yeah. I don't know why I thought of that. I don't know, but because he did make a movie called Silent Movie, which has no sound.
True.
But this game has plenty of sound.
Wow.
And
that was the segue. Okay.
It's pretty bad. What do you think of the sound direction in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I probably won't like, you know, laud it quite as much as we have with the graphics, because I really think the graphics are the standout here. But I mean, the sound design is also superb. That's the other half of that thing I was saying earlier about how this is a game that's impossible to ignore, where they very much, it's fairly obvious that this was designed in such a way to like make itself known in the otherwise like, you know, loud cacophony that is your, you know, general arcade back in like the, you know, 80s and 90s, because everything was vying for your attention. And then you have this game come along where it is just a constant barrage of just dudes screaming, dying in a fire, and like explosions. And the gun sound effects also, I feel like were done in a way to purposefully get your attention, because it's like they're different than a lot of other gun sound effects that you get from other like run and guns or shmups or what have you. They're like
less tinny, more bass.
Yeah. Well, kind of, I don't know. I was actually going to say it's kind of the other direction, in that it almost seems like they're in a slightly higher register to like purposefully kind of grab your attention from other things. But that might just be the overall sound design.
You might be right. I might be fucked up.
The screams like sound kind of fried out.
Yeah.
Like someone was screaming directly into a microphone. But yeah, I mean, I guess that sounds kind of negative, but that's all to say that it's part of the package. And I think they actually did it pretty well. Like this game definitely gets right up in your face.
I would even say the music is good too. It's just you're not going to be hearing a lot of it over the screams and explosions and gunfire. Like it'll start out with like typical army music. And I tried listening to it while I was playing it earlier today. And they'll just kind of switch over to smooth jazz while you're just blowing dudes up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is just, it's one of those things that I don't see ever really taking the smile off my face. Because this game, it does have periods like in the snow level when you have to platform, which is honestly kind of bad. But like it has those kind of lulls where you do get to hear things. But for the most part, yeah, you're constantly firing at things. You're constantly just trying to pay attention to how to survive. That, like, the music in the background isn't something you're necessarily going to pay attention to. And it's probably really good. It's just, it is what it is. You're focusing on, you know, and that kind of stuff all the time, and throwing explosions. So, which are all fantastic. You're right. The screams from your bad guys when they die, they sound a little compressed or just a little scratchy. But again, this is on a cartridge on a system that was created, I think, in 1991, 92.
Yeah.
So for the clarity that you're getting there, I understand it's a significantly more powerful system than the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. I mean, it's all there. It's fine. It's this. I'm definitely not going to complain about it. I think the overall sound direction is fantastic.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I think the only thing, and this is really just kind of I guess a commentary on the game as a whole, but a large part of it is the sound presentation, is that it really, you know how I said that I'd almost prefer this game to be like twice as long but half as difficult. I still kind of adhere to that, but like only if that difficulty came with less constant stimuli. Because I think this game is good in that it doesn't overstay its welcome because of just how relentless Metal Slug is on all fronts, from the presentation to the gameplay to the sound. It is just, it's fucking on for like 30 to 45 minutes. And you know what? Like, maybe if it was longer than that, it might actually get a little exhausting. So,
yeah. All right. So I don't think we have any fun facts this week. Not that there aren't any, but we just don't have any. I think it's time to wrap this game up and talk about whether or not this game holds up today. I've been throwing it over to you, Shane, for almost the majority of these topics. So I'm going to start this one off and you can close this out.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that, yeah, this game holds up, if you couldn't tell. I will say this. If you don't like arcade difficulty, if you don't like an arcade challenge, if you don't want to feel like you get to the end through just having endless continues and inserting the coin, and you don't want that cheap feeling, this game's going to give you some headaches. It's going to frustrate you, and you're probably not going to be as impressed by it. But I think that just kind of goes to show where that can be said for almost any arcade game, right? Especially those that encourage that kind of gameplay. If you want to put the time into it, and you can, to where you get good at it, and that's your headspace, or you just like taking a few levels to just blow off some steam and play some, run and gun games and just enjoy having a good time with a game that has fantastical graphical presentation that is both inviting and accommodating to anyone of any era, really, then this is a game that you should at least give a shot. It's classic. It's a classic game for all the right reasons. A lot of people keep going back to it and mentioning it because it's a gorgeous game that's just focused on fun. I know it's not considered to be the best in the series. That's probably, I think, 2 or 3 by the general consensus, but it's still a great game that kicked off a great franchise. It has some flaws. As we said, be prepared for those. It is an arcade game. It does want to punish you, and it has no problem doing so. So if you want more ease of access, go the Contra route. But this is definitely for the video game aficionado. Shane?
I would tend to agree with that assessment. Listen, at the end of the day, anybody can play this game, and anybody should at least once. It is a good time. I mean, one of the things that the development team made very clear early on was that they wanted to make a game that was just fun and was something that could be an outlet for people to just go into an arcade and just blow off some of that steam, like we mentioned, and just have a good time. And I think this game really does achieve that. Granted, you're right. If you're talking about all of the games in the Metal Slug series, which I think technically there's like 6, but 3, I think, more or less tends to be the one that everybody likes to go to as the quote end quote best one, just because of some of the gameplay refinements and additional things they've added to the game. This one is, of course, a little bit more bare bones than that because it was the first one, right? But you can't really go wrong with it. I mean, gripes and criticisms aside about some of the gameplay elements and the arcade difficulty, it's not really asking a whole lot of you. I mean, you can get this thing done in, like we said, 30 to maybe 45 minutes. And if for nothing else, play it just to see the love and care that went into every single pixel that is in this game, because I could be proven wrong. Something could come along. But as far as I'm concerned, Metal Slug, especially 1, 2, and 3, are the prime example of like peak 2D sprite work. You really cannot get better than this. So if you have any appreciation for that kind of artistry whatsoever, do yourself a favor and play through Metal Slug at least one time. It's available damn near anywhere at this point. I mean, it's on iOS. I wouldn't recommend playing it that way because this game's hard as fuck already, and playing it with touch controls might not be a great time. But, you know, if you have access to Steam and, you know, you want to play it there, that's what I did. So, you know, pick it up there. You can usually get it pretty cheap. And I think it's well worth your time for sure. So does it hold up today? Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up. And it's also dirt cheap on most of these platforms as well.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't have to pay a lot for it.
And I mean, most of the time you can get it in a collection, too. So you can just get all of them together.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I think this wraps this episode up. Shane, Metal Slug is Metal Slug. What can I say?
That's right.
One of our Discord users, even before we recorded this, was talking about Metal Slug, and their review of it is Metal Slug is the tits. I wouldn't go that far, but I could understand why someone would say that. It's tit adjacent. I will say that.
That's a fair assessment.
Shane, how about you carry us out of here?
Yeah, sure. So if you are listening to this, then that means you have in fact found us. So congratulations to you. And we are glad that you are here. So hello, welcome.
Hi.
If this is your first time around, then perhaps you might not be aware that there are many other ways that you can interact with us and the show and the fantastic little community that we've gotten built up around us over the years. And so if you'd like to do that, all you have to do is go over to linktree/retro hangover. That's linktr.ee/retro hangover. And there you will find things like our public Discord, where we have our monthly high score challenges. So that's always a fun time trying to get in there and compete for that. We do now offer a prize for first place, so that's always a good motivator. You can get yourself a Steam key, or in lieu of that, some Steam credit. So feel free to jump into the fray on that one. We've also got our socials, as well as the YouTube and the Twitch channels. And if you'd like to support the show in a more concrete sort of fashion, then you can do that by heading over to the Patreon or picking up something at the merch store. We have both of those. And all of that is in one place over at that link tree. So please go ahead and check that out. And speaking of the Twitch channel, Chris, what is it that we do there on Sundays?
So if you head to twitch.tv/retro hangover on Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern US time, you can see us play video games of some kind. We'll play whatever. You don't know what we're going to play.
Maybe Metal Slug.
I don't know what we're going to play. Maybe Metal Slug. Maybe GoldenEye. Maybe Lunar. You never know. Shane, what we're going to play. I feel like someone's been putting it off.
I had to play GoldenEye, Chris. Okay. I'll get back to it. I promise.
You go to twitch.tv/retro hangover and we'll take care of you on your Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern US time. And as I said, if there are some games that when I get to them, I will be streaming on the regular. So just go there, give it a follow. You never know when we're going to pop up and give you a good time. Wait.
No, that's
Never mind.
No, that's,
you know what I meant.
That's exactly, no, that's staying. That's exactly what he meant. You all heard it. All right,
Shane.
Well, I suppose with all of that being said, until next time,
play with your fluffy croissant joysticks.